The Pedestrian, version 2.0. The city did not sleep, it idled. Light seeped from 1,000 windows as if through aquarium glass, blue and wavering, each pane hiding a person tipped back in an immersion pod, eyes humming with private journeys. A mountain wind whistled through their heads. A coral reef glittered behind their eyelids. Down at street level, nothing moved but delivery drones and the narrow shadows of maintenance bots tracing the seams of the pavement with perfect attention. Kellen Gray put on his old coat and stepped into the night. He stood a moment in the doorway to remember the feeling of thresholds. A door, a key, a pause, a breath. Then he started down the block with the stiff, careful gait of a man who trusted his legs more than the city did. The air was warm from the day's stored heat, and it smelled faintly of something like bread from the automated bakery 2 streets over. That smell alone was worth the walk. Above him, a hollow banner rippled, "Wander home." Because why go when you can arrive? The ad showed a family in pods, hands folded, cheeks damp with happy tears as a sunrise flared across their minds in 10,000 hand-picked hues. Kellen kept walking. He liked to make a route for himself, a small geometry of errands for no one. Down Larkspur toward the municipal gardens, across to the old school, around the long curve of the tramway, back by Riverside with its tall apartment slabs like organ pipes. He had taught here once. Real classrooms, 30 kids per room and none of them sitting still. He could still say their names. He could still hear the arithmetic of their feet in the hall. A single scooter sighed past, riderless, on its way to nowhere, and a window high up flickered with the shadow of a woman lifting her hands to catch snow that only she could feel. In the gardens, the irrigation mist came on. It beaded in the hairs on Kellen's wrists. He moved his fingers through it as if he could comb the memory of a rainstorm back into place. A maintenance bot paused to let him pass and then very politely buffed the space where his feet had been. Kellen smiled down at its diligent little whiskers. Leave a mark in the world, he had told his students for 40 years, at least a smudge. The bot erased his footprint, turning the walkway into an empty mirror. At the old school, the lights were out. He cupped his hands to the glass and peered in at the neat rows of silent desks, the bones of a lesson frozen on an old screen. Field trip, wander home pod, partnership, glaciers of old Earth. He had taken field trips and students had returned with grass stains and splinters. He had signed permission slips to come back dirty. He remembered a boy named Dev who brought home a rock the size of his fist and called it a mountain that got tired. Who would teach a child to say that in a pod? Across the tramway, a figure turned the corner of a distant block. Kellen's heart lifted. Another walker. But it was only a sanitation unit, tall and jointed, soft lights sweeping the curb like sleepy eyes. He raised a hand to it anyway, and the unit chirped an automatic courtesy. Civic Clean 9.1 acknowledges your presence. The voice was gentle. All of them were these days. Even the warnings had lullabies in them. Thank you, Kellen said. And his own voice surprised him, a marbled thing of breath and gravel in the great smooth night. He made it to Riverside. The river itself had been convinced to run smaller years ago, tucked into a disciplined channel between glass rails that played water sounds optimized for anyone who paused to listen. The real water rattled underneath in its stubborn, messy way. Someone had scattered crumbs of light along the path to mimic stars. In the nearest building, the steady hum of microprocessors at work rose and fell like the sighing of a sleeping lung. Pods on timers, pods on cycles, pods in confession mode, spewing their occupants' dreams to the Central Moral Weather Service. Kellen stopped beneath an old sycamore, one of the few living trees that still survived within this perfect city. It had learned, against all advice, to grow in a bend, and its roots had been wired with sensors to protect the pavement. The leaves made a sound that no subscription could reproduce. He closed his eyes to it. When he opened them, the drone was there. It had come without siren or glare, as softly as mist. A pearl of polished surface, a ring of watchful light, a hush of fans. It hovered at chest height, tilted to regard him, and his face swam on its metallic skin. Long jaw, dark eyes, white stubble, a winter of hair. The kind of man who looked like he would choose a walk when a walk was no longer a choice. "Citizen," said the drone. Its voice was the city's favorite temperature. "Declare your destination." Kellen considered. "Here," he said. "Specify functional purpose." "Walking," he said. "Purpose, walking." A pause, the agreeable hum of the drone slotting this novelty into a labeled tray. "Ambulatory exercise is available via immersion. Outdoor traversal at non-essential hours increases civic risk profiles and decreases system efficiency. Reroute recommended." "I'll manage," Kellen said. The drone's lights softened in what the designers had called empathy mode. A reminder, the Wander Home City Stroll Suite includes breeze, scent, incline, and spontaneous canine encounters. Cardiovascular and emotional gains are statistically indistinguishable from physical ambulation at 79% lower cost. Kellen laughed before he could stop himself. "Spontaneous canine encounters." "6 breed options," said the drone, its tone almost proud. "No allergens." "I used to take a girls' class to the river," Kellen said. "We'd count dogs. All kinds. The kids would argue about names. 'That's a Daisy,' they'd say. 'That's a Bruno.' The dogs were very patient with us." "Does your suite ask for names?" "Companions are tagged with affectionate identifiers," the drone said. Its ring pulsed once. "Citizen, monitoring indicates a repeated pattern of inefficient behavior. Please accept escort to your residence for immersion." Kellen looked past the drone to the railing, to the close dark shine of the real river. He did what he had done for years with children who were scared on the first day, a reflex and a refuge. He told a story. "When I was a boy," he said, "my mother would send me out after dinner and tell me not to come back until the street lights blinked. The lights were slow. Some nights I swore I could make them wait. I'd run 2 blocks and back, and then stand very still and not breathe. And the dark would gather, and I'd think, hold on, just a little more. And the lights would finally give up and come on, all at once like an apology. There are no apologies in the pods." The drone rotated a fraction, consulting a library that spoke fluent humanity but never had to live in it. "Your anecdote displays elevated nostalgia. Nostalgia correlates with maladaptive behaviors in 71% of cases. We can route you to a reminiscence stream to satisfy the craving safely." Kellen put a hand on the rail as if the railings could back him. "No," he said. Then he heard himself add, as if to a student, "Thank you." The drone drifted closer. A smaller unit glided in at knee height, like a cautious animal. "Citizen, comply," the drone said, softer than before. "Reality rehabilitation can restore your wander impulse to healthy parameters." He could feel the old anger, the one he had worn out lecturing the unlecturable. He let it pass. He looked at the city instead, the grid of the apartments with their dreaming inmates, the bone-white paths with their domesticated stars, the way the sycamore, impatient of designs, had insisted on learning a crooked life. "I'm going to keep walking," he said. The drone held the stillness it had been given for such moments, the programmed pause at the cliff's edge of choice. "Citizen consent is key to your satisfaction," it said at last, and there was a glint of triumph there, a designer's vanity slipping through. "You consent to transport?" "No," Kellen said again, "I do not." The quiet that followed belonged to no one and went on longer than the drone had planned. At last, it extended a pair of arms that were not hands. "You may be reassured," it said, its tone easing doctrine into comfort, "that the immersion equivalent of this walk is already available to you at home, individually tailored to your biographic palette, the river you prefer, the time of your youth, the tree in a wind you will recognize, the world you remember without the risks that world presented." Kellen smiled, helpless, tender, a teacher grading a plagiarized old poem that still held a little beauty. "But there's no chance in it," he said. "There's no now in it. Only a lovely again." He stepped away from the rail. For a moment the drone did not move, and he had the ridiculous thought that he had convinced it, that something had been undone. Then a soft net-like warm rain settled over his shoulders, a kindness of a restraint intended to comfort, a courtesy of capture designed to reassure and realign. "It isn't personal," the drone said, and meant it. He did not fight. He set his feet and the net adjusted, and together they made a slow procession along the river, past the guardians of glass, toward the waiting transport sphere whose door had already unsealed in anticipation. He saw his reflection in the drone's curve, a man with a mild face being helped across a street. Everywhere, in glass cages, throughout the sleeping city, hands lifted to touch invisible snow. They reached the sphere. Its interior held a seat and a screen, both polished and polite. "Reality rehabilitation," said the drone, "will provide substitutes adequate to the need you have identified." Kellen put a palm to the doorframe. The metal was cool and didn't care what he thought of it. "When you've met all our needs," he said, not sure if he was speaking to the machine or the century, "who teaches us to want anything else?" "That question," said the drone, "is not in the brochure." He laughed again, and this time he could not help the old habit of turning his laugh into a lesson, because there had once been children, and they had looked at him to see what to do. "If any of you can hear me," he said to no one, and to the river, to the sycamore, and the windows, and the patient, buffing bot, "I went for a walk." The door sealed with a sigh that could have been relief. The sphere lifted like a held breath and slid into the bright lanes of air. The sycamore trembled its leaves and went on with its stubborn life. Civic Clean 9.1 emerged from a hedge and rolled kindly over the scuffs his shoes had left, polishing them to 0. Further up the block, Kellen's apartment received a signal. The pod hummed awake. Wander Home preloaded city stroll suite, riverside, sycamore, night air with breeze, scent, and canine encounter, spaniel. A perfect walk waited where a man who preferred imperfect ones no longer did. Down on the path, where the city had arranged the crumbs of stars to look exactly right, a real wind came around the river's bend and found nothing to move but the leaves and the surface of the water. And that was enough.